Hello, Pilates teachers and enthusiasts. Today we're here to talk about the chair. So, Joe Pilates chair is a piece of apparatus that we use in privates and group classes. Now, before we get into all the exercises of the chair, I want to go over a little bit of the history. Now, here's why. Knowledge of history of the chair and how Joe Pilates thought and putting together all of the curriculum of the chair will help you to understand why he chose to do certain exercises with this piece of equipment. So, here's the history. This chair was actually designed by Joseph Pilates to go into a really tiny, cramped Manhattan studio apartment. If you can see here, you're probably familiar with how a chair is normally arranged. You got the seat right here, you have a pedal, you have a frame. However, I'm going to flip this thing. If you take this pedal, put it up here, and then you flip it over, like that. This is how he envisioned it would be in your apartment in Manhattan. You'd put a little cushion here, you'd put another cushion here, and you'd sit in that chair, you'd watch your TV or whatever you like to do, or have a little extra chair. And so therefore, you wouldn't have to worry about having a huge piece of apparatus, and there'd be no excuses for you to have be able to do a Pilates workout at home. So these modern chairs aren't really built to be used as a armchair, but that is the history behind this thing. So I'm going to turn this thing back upright here and get this pedal set up with the springs. Okay, now the reason why it's important to know about the history of the chair is this. Think about it. If all you had was a limited amount of space and you had this piece of equipment and the floor and a yoga mat, all right, that would dictate what you would be able to do in that space. If, however, you had other pieces of apparatus like a reformer or a Cadillac or a springboard or a ladder barrel, then it might be better for you to use those pieces of apparatus for certain exercises. And having the chair is in certain ways a compromise. If you don't have any of this equipment, you got a really narrow, small, cramped space, then Joseph Pilates is saying you can do a complete, holistic, whole body workout with just this piece of apparatus, the ground, gravity, and your body. So that's a fantastic thing. However, what I don't want you to think is that, well, in that case, is the chair a complete compromise? In that case, if I have other equipment, should I use that and completely ignore the chair? No, that's not the case. So the chair there's some exercises that you can do on the chair that are absolutely fantastic. Some Pilates teachers, including myself, we love doing certain stretches, certain exercises on the chair. There are certain things that you cannot do anywhere else than the chair. So it's an incredibly valuable piece of equipment. But you also have to understand, if you look at some of the exercises that your Pilates instructor gives you, or Pilates teachers, if you are wondering, this exercise on the chair is kind of awkward, and why would I do this if I had other equipment? Well, the answer is you probably wouldn't if you had other equipment. And so therefore, I'm going to try to point out some of the intricacies of the exercises where there are compromises and where certain exercises on the chair are absolutely beautiful. So let's go over a little bit of the anatomy of this chair. You have the front of the chair right here where the pedal is, and you have the back of the chair here and obviously the sides. Right here on top, you've got the seat of the chair, and you've also got this pedal. This right here, this interpretation of Joe Pilates' chair has a mono pedal. Let me show you. Right here. Versus a split pedal. So there are many chairs that have split pedals. Now, one of the reasons why you may choose a mono pedal chair versus a split pedal chair might simply be economics. A split pedal chair is, in some cases, significantly more expensive than just one pedal. On the back of this chair right here, you have a place where you can put your springs. This manufacturer calls this a cactus. So you have all these little protrusions up here that you can put a spring on. On this particular rendition, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 places where you can put your springs. And you have 2 springs. On split pedal chairs, you'll have 2 or sometimes 4 springs. on the chair in order to change the difficulty of a particular exercise or give you more or less support depending on what you want to do. All right, so you have a slight little cutout on the edge, and I'll show you what that's used for. The other thing about this chair is this. It's very light, and so therefore it is easy to move around as per Joe Pilates' original design. But the problem is also it's very light, so therefore it doesn't have much stability in certain exercises, so you don't want to approach using the chair in a cavalier fashion. There's significant safety concerns that you have to look at when you're interacting with this piece of equipment. Now, other chairs will have handles right up here off the side where you'll have brackets and handles will come up, and you can do things like dips, and it also gives you stability and safety when you're doing certain exercises, whether you're standing up on top of the chair or whether you are seated. All right, so let's go over a little bit more about this cactus system. All right, so these springs here, where you place them determines the difficulty. So on this particular model, the higher you put the springs, the more tension is exhibited upwards by this pedal here. All right. Now, I want you to know something. The springs, even though you have a 1, 2, 3, 4 setting, having one spring on number 4 is not the same thing as having 2 springs on number 2. It doesn't work that way. So Pilates teachers and Pilates practitioners, what you really want to do is you want to customize the amount of settings for your body. Or Pilates teachers, when you're working with your clientele, you want to make sure that you customize and adapt to the particular bodily dimensions of whoever's going to be interacting with this chair. So what I tell my students who are becoming Pilates teachers is that when you are working with the chair, make sure you get on that, do certain exercises, and see how it feels for you. So if you know for your own body, you do a particular exercise, both one spring on number 1 and one spring on number 2, that's wonderful. I want you to then experiment. Go a little bit lighter, go a little bit heavier, and see how that treats your body. There may be certain settings that will, if you do a little bit too light, you may not even be able to move or get up out of position. Or if the setting is a little bit too heavy, it might actually catapult you in a very unsafe fashion off of the machine. So therefore, it's your professional responsibility to see what the settings feel like for every single exercise that you teach. Or Pilates enthusiasts, if you're working with a chair, what may happen is your teacher may give you a particular setting for your chair and say, try that. Now that may be all well and good, but what happens is that sometimes you will get, well, your body composition changes. Maybe, around the holidays, you may have a little bit extra food, a little bit extra weight, or it may be afterwards you lose that weight. So weight will be a huge determining factor in certain exercises. The other thing is you're going to get stronger, and that's the hope. If you get stronger at certain exercises, if you have a lot of support when you first start, and then we're going to reduce that amount of weight, and that'll give you additional challenge. Much like if you're progressively getting stronger by lifting weights, you want to increase the level of resistance and load that you get onto the body. So the same thing happens with a chair. Don't assume that because you have one setting that works well for you, it's going to work well for you throughout time. All right, now that we've gone over the general history of the chair and perhaps the philosophy of use and how you might want to think about approaching exercises on the chair, I want to talk about safety. Now, this chair has the smallest surface area of any of the apparatus that we have. And because of that, it presents certain unique challenges as far as safety arises. I will have my students who are becoming Pilates teachers have a mock conversation with me. I'll say, well, I want you to tell me what are the particularities of this chair when you're working with somebody, and those would be margin for error. Here's what I mean by margin for error. If you'll notice, this chair pedal has a really small surface area right here. So if you're interacting with this chair and you're placing your feet on this chair and doing something or other right here, your positioning has to be pretty precise. So if you're on a reformer and you're lying down and you have a little bit of misalignment, let's just say your hips are off to the side slightly. That's not ideal, but you're probably not going to be falling off of that reformer. However, on this chair, there's a chance you could fall. For instance, if there's an exercise like this when you're off to the side and you're coming up, notice how if this foot is positioned a little bit cavalierly, a little bit off to the side, and you come on up, you may actually slip straight off that thing. So you'll have to be very precise. And so what this means is that this requires a bit more training, a bit more forethought. I will tell my Pilates teachers to tell their clients that when you're going to be working on the chair, you're going to be way more picky with them. So lots of clients, they may be a little bit taken aback. They're thinking, wow, how come my instructor is suddenly very, very picky about my form? Well, there's a very good reason for that, because this chair can toss you like a rodeo bull if you're not careful. So therefore, even little minutiae in how you place your feet is going to be extremely important. How your hands interact with this is going to be extraordinarily important. Literally an inch or two deviation in where you put your body can totally make or break that exercise. So that's a huge thing. Margin for error. There's a very small, very little margin for error when you're working with a piece of equipment like this. Precision is important, and that translates to the fact that you have to pay attention when you're working with the chair. Whether you are a Pilates practitioner working with the chair yourself, or whether you are a Pilates teacher teaching somebody how to work with the chair, you really have to have a heightened level of focus, a heightened level of responsibility, and you have to worry about all the things that could possibly go wrong. The other thing is, when you're working with this piece of apparatus, it's very easy for you to slip off of this. So there are times when you'll interact when you have your hands on this, or your feet will be up here. And so if you have any sweatiness in your hands, and honestly, if you're working hard, you probably are sweating a little bit, or if you have hyperhidrosis, very common, there's a chance that you can slip off of this. Now, obviously, if your feet are on something like a reformer, and if they slip, sure, the carriage may come in a little bit, but the chance of injury isn't as great as it is with this chair. So therefore, you really want to instill in yourself a certain attitude that the chair demands respect. If you do not accord the chair the respect that it deserves, it could really come back and bite you. So, well, now that we've gone over the safety and the protocols and the history of the chair, let's go over some of the exercises.